when you enter into relationships, how do you start to balance the time you're spending nurturing that relationship with all the other things that are going on in your early days of relationship? So, Melissa, what happens when that imbalance is wrong?
Yeah. One of the partners could start to feel neglected or like they're not as important, that they're not a priority. And so it comes down to discussing it again. And you know what? And maybe acknowledging that there are some times in our life that aren't going to be, they're a bit imbalanced where, during soccer season, for instance, when you were playing in college, I'm going to get less of your time because you had practice every night, you had games, you were traveling. So kind of being accepting of that and not getting upset about that. It's not that I'm lower on the priority, but I could see how some people would feel, and I've heard do feel that, oh, it's always about this or this, and it's never about me. And that can cause a rift.
We strive for balance over the long haul, but at any given moment, you're probably going to have some imbalance, right? And it feels like almost every one of these areas of potential conflict come back to a few easy ways to resolve them. Communication being top of that list, right? Clear communication about what are your time requirements, because sometimes it might be perceived that you don't want to be together, but reality is you have these other demands that are more timely, or they're more pressing, or they're time sensitive, or they're core issues. I got to make my money. I got to go to work. I have to do schooling. I can't graduate if I don't. Like, there's some that have deadlines or timelines to them. I couldn't necessarily skip training. I couldn't skip games. I was getting paid to be an athlete. That was part of my thing. But I could communicate better around why certain things couldn't happen at certain times. And then the other thing I would say on this is that early in love or early in relationships, I think it's reasonable to expect that there's more priority spent in some areas. I'm still very much an individual at that point. I have my collegiate career, I have my schooling, I have my work. You are just one piece of what was going on in my life. But as we got more and more serious, you became a larger piece of what was going on in my life. So I had to deprioritize some of the other things. Is that a fair statement of young love as it progresses?
Yeah, definitely. And it makes sense if you think about it.
It does here, but I don't know that it does here for some people, right? If you're in early infatuation, you might want more time than a person can give you. And if you read too much into that as being, well, they just don't want to spend time with me, they're prioritizing the other things, it does speak to different levels of commitment. And you got to use that to assess where are you in your relationship. But I think some people run too hot too quick, and others are probably a slow burn that takes too long, right? So like finding that balance.
Right.
And I think we had a little bit of that. I mean, we definitely tested boundaries and stuff more so than you in college, of like, no, I need more personal time and more space and whatever. Whereas I think you were much, much closer to being set to be serious than I was. I took a little bit longer to sort of do more of that social and partying and disconnected time than you did. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah. And I think I did feel the things that we were talking about earlier, which is I didn't feel I was a priority. And, how much time should I spend on somebody that doesn't make me a priority? And thinking through that. And I think that's pretty common in a relationship.
Well, and I think that's there comes a time in every relationship where you're going to have those pressure tests, right? And I think a natural arc, and I was reading something the other day that was this like 5 phases that all relationships go through. And it's ironic we're giving a top 10 or a 10 list. And I was like, I don't really believe in these 5 phases, but the psychologist sitting next to me or the therapist sitting next to me go, oh yeah, there's definitely 5 phases or 3 phases or whatever. But one of those was you're inevitably going to go through a point where your relationship gets pressure tested. And you have to figure out, is this the time to lean in and really make something of this? Or is this the time to step away? And sometimes you temporarily step away, which clearly happened with us. We stepped away for a little while, and it gave me the space I needed to realize, oh no, wait a minute. When these things are out of my life, my priorities are really all messed up and it doesn't work. And I think that helped me come back to be much more prioritizing this in my relationship. So that sort of, was it absence makes the heart grow fonder? Okay.
Yeah. But you're right. You don't know. Sometimes you don't know what you're missing till it's gone,
Sure, exactly.
kind of thing. And I think that's what happened. And At the time, I wasn't appreciative of you taking that time. But then when we did get back together, it felt right. And I knew, okay, he's making this choice because he gave us some thought and he's back. So yay. And so hindsight that was good for us.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess I think that's a pretty good exploration of that. We'll probably dig into in a future episode more details around that because there's lots of stories around how that happened and
Lots of stories.
some I might not want to share, but I guess that's the part of transparency and authenticity is we'll share some of those stories.
Right.
I probably don't look too good in many of those stories, so we'll see how it goes. I'm going to try to paint them all against you somehow, but probably won't work.
Well, I can honestly say you've redeemed yourself since then.
I mean, I got 30 plus years of
Yeah. Yeah. But
proof
still,
now, right?
you know what? Some people keep making the same mistakes over and over again.
Yeah,
and
fair enough.
people stay in relationships because it's easier to do so, even if it's a hard relationship. So
Right.